Paul. Hey, good morning or good afternoon, folks. Welcome. So happy to have you here. We were just starting our call with our question of the day, and so please feel free to share. They're so much fun. What is your favorite saying or phrase that includes animals? So if you have one from another culture or a language, please, or an era, share the meaning with us. We have some great ones in the chat. And thank you all for being a part of our day today. We're kicking off March and our community conversations that this month will be dedicated to the Open Arms Challenge. So that means we are dedicating our topics to welcoming and inclusive practices as part of the Open Arms Challenge. And so it is supported by 20 national partners, speaking of which, co-hosting with me today, someone who I think is the cat's pajamas, is Allison Cardona. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison. I'm the California State Director for the UC Davis Correct Shelter Medicine Program, and very happy to be here and join the incredible Irene. And it was stuck in my head, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, but I had to really look up what it meant. So I think it's better to be content with what you have than to want something different. So yeah, great to be here.
Wonderful, thank you. And everyone, I'm Irene Chanswong. I'm a grant specialist at Maddie's Fund. And again, welcome all. If you, so a quick just announcement about the Open Arms Challenge. If you applied and didn't get your notification email, please contact Maddie's Fund. Allison Gibson will be dropping that email address in the chat. If you're not participating in the challenge, you're still welcomed on these calls and still have a chance to enter to win a prize for the monthly community conversations. But here to announce our February community conversation and Maddie's Pet Forum grant winners is Kelly Clarity.
Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. I am really excited to announce our winners of not only the community conversations giveaways from February, but also the Maddie's Pet Forum giveaway from February. So let me share my screen. All right, can y'all see this? I know it's not in presentation mode yet, but you can see this?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So our February winners for the weekly community conversations. We have 4 winners, $2,500 each. Alicia Mason from Animal Advocates of the Ozarks. Shayna McCauley from Freed Spirits Animal Rescue. Tracy Satter from Wags and Whiskers. And Laramie Smovier from City of Great Falls Animal Shelter. We also have one winner, of $3,000 for the Maddie's Pet Forum giveaway, and that's Amanda Gray of Truly All Cats Trapping and Rescue. So congratulations. And if any of our winners are on here and want to say hi real quick, we'd love for you to unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, it's Shanna with Freed Spirits Animal Rescue.
Hi, Shanna.
Hi.
Congratulations.
Thank you very, very much. This has been a wealth of information. I'm just happy to be a part of this, and we're stoked. We're very excited. Thank you all very, very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you for everything you do.
All right.
Anyone else? Irene, it's back to you.
All right, thanks, Kelly. And also, I know you'll be dropping those entry links in the chat. So appreciate that. Everybody be on the lookout. And so again, thank you, everybody. Before Allison does introduce our wonderful panelists who are previous Open Arms Challenge winners, we do want to make space for national updates. And I know that Dr. Cynthia Delaney wanted to make an announcement.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know or remind you, if you've already heard, about our exciting Spring 2023 Shelter Summit that's happening next Tuesday, March 14th. And I am going to share our little promo video and then tell you a quick few words about the event so you have some more information. All right, here we go. Hopefully my share sound works. Can you guys all see that screen with like a black screen?
Yes.
Yes.
I know we've got a long way to go. I know we've got a long road home. I know we've got a long way to go. Let's do this. Are you ready for a comeback? Are you ready to fly? Are you ready for the moment? Get ready to ride. Calling all the fighters, calling on survivors. Are you up all nighters? We can take it higher. Let's do this. Let's do this.
All right, so that is our little video. It is a half-day live summit, and it'll also be available on demand. We've got some amazing speakers. I'm not just saying that because there's probably a few in the room, including Allison Cardona. So we've got 5 topics. We're going to spend a half hour on each one at a high-level overview. And then the thing we're trying that we think might be impactful for people and that we're hopeful will be is then after the conference, there's going to be fast tracks, which is a set of meetings that people can come to learn more, but also to get help implementing the programs that we've talked about. So we've got our 5 topics. You can take a look at the information on sheltersummit.com. And then after the event happens, we start with these fast tracks, and each topic will have coaches that you can work with for 8 weeks on actually implementing the program stepwise. Because we've heard from a lot of people that there's a lot of information out there, but sometimes implementation is a barrier and people need a little more support than they can get just from watching online webinars. So we're gonna try this new track out. And if you come to the event and you enjoy it, or just ahead of time know you wanna continue with implementing something, you can join one of the fast tracks. And if you're really motivated and want more accountability, you can actually apply to be in a track pack, and those people get even more coaching and support. So we would love to see you all at this event. We've got a lot of people from the community already wanting to join and registering for the event. So you will not be alone. Right now, we've got over 1,000 registrants from the industry. And we're also really trying to get leadership, management, and frontline staff, because sometimes change comes top down, sometimes it comes bottom up, and we really want everybody involved, and we want our future leaders to also be involved. So we're super excited. We've got all these great speakers. Take a look, register, and consider doing one of the fast tracks, because we think it's going to be really helpful for people. So, and of course, thanks to Maddie, because they make it all possible. This is part of the Maddie's Million Pet Challenge. Hope to see you there.
Thanks, Dr. Delaney. I think you're still sharing your screen. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Were there any other national updates?
Hi, folks. It's Kathy from Humane Canada. I don't have a cool super video like Dr. Delaney, but just want to remind you all that the Humane Canada Summit for Animals is happening just in not even 2 months from now, in early May in Victoria, BC. Thank you for Allison for dropping the link in the chat. So please consider signing up and coming on up to BC and meeting with us all. We'd love to see you there.
Thanks, Kathy. I see Bob you're unmuted. Did you have an announcement?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, we have 370 second graders working on helping us get our animals adopted by doing, let's see. Yeah, there we go. So they're drawing, we're giving them bios and pictures, and the kids are drawing pictures and putting it in the words of the animals. And we've got 370 of them going on, second graders throughout Williamsburg, Virginia and surrounding areas, helping 6 shelters and 3 rescues. This was done in Richmond, Virginia last fall, and we've picked up on it, and we've got a lot of second graders doing a lot of good hard work for us. As you can see, someone behind me, they were recognized during the last legislative process in Richmond. So encourage people to look into it. There's a Facebook page called Kids, Cats, and Canines.
It's really cool.
Yeah, really cool. Thank you.
You're
Hey,
welcome.
Irene.
Yeah.
It'd be okay if I put on my professor hat and put a link in the chat for our next Maddie's Insight webcast this Thursday. And I got to tell you, these people who are going to come on and talk about the research that they've done about treatment options for dogs with huge fear and anxiety, they're world renowned, and I highly recommend people sign up for it. So there's a link in the chat to join. It's free, of course, and you can join. You can sign up for race and Kawa and Naka continuing education credit.
Love it. Thanks, Allison. Thanks for sharing that info.
I have one more, Irene. Definitely want to plug the My Dog is My Home virtual conference, which is coming up March 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. It's so easy to register. You can join virtually, and there's an incredible lineup of speakers. And it's really about keeping pets and people together and a co-sheltering approach. So encourage everyone to register.
Hi, everyone. This is Emily Gelb with the ASPCA. The call for speakers for the 2023 Access to Vet Care Conference is now open, and I'll put the link for that in the chat.
Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer Comas from the Humane Society of the United States. Along the conference lines, just want to remind everybody about Animal Care Expo coming up in New Orleans, April 3rd through 6th. We do have some hotel rooms left, just not a ton. So please book those rooms if you haven't already, and register if you have not as well. And I'll put the information in the chat too.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And if there are no more national updates, Allison, I would love to kick this off to you for intros to our wonderful panelists today.
Thanks so much, Irene. And so grateful that we're focusing this month on welcoming and including practices. And today we have 4 panel members. Charice Davis, who's the founder and CEO of Hands and Feet Pet Advocates in Tennessee. We also have Faith Koleszar, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, the adoption supervisor for Montgomery County Animal Services and Adoption Center in Maryland. Rhiannon Lewis, who's the development officer for the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals of Hancock County in Maine. And finally, Shelbi Waters, the executive director of Souris Valley Animal Shelter in North Dakota. And these folks are here today. They're past winners of the Open Arms challenges, and we'll be asking some questions and also welcome questions from the group. So I think, Irene, you're going to kick us off with questions.
Yeah, I was hoping that each of them wouldn't mind sharing their winning programs with the audience today. Whoever would like to start first, please do so.
I don't mind. I can start. Hi, everyone. You did say my name correctly. Thank you. So I'm Faith from Montgomery County, Maryland. The adoption supervisor here, and we were able to rewrite our adoption policies and procedures to make them a little bit more inclusive and also a little bit less biased. So we were asking questions about, do you rent or own? What's your home type? We also had a child score. And so we were really moving away from basing our policies on numbers and removing those barriers that were in place so we can go more towards the communication approach and having counseling sessions, sitting down and talking to people, being more welcoming and inclusive, the open adoption policies that we're all familiar with.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, of course.
So with that, how did your application process? I mean, there are, I think of rescue and I think of certain dogs that have specific requirements for homes. They have to be in a fenced yard or they're not very good in apartments. Or how did you kind of accommodate that and make sure that they were a good fit? Did you do like phone calls before home visits? Or how did you kind of assess that? And then how did you get that contact from them and say, we'll reach out and get the rest of the information kind of?
A great question. So the way we have our system set up is we first have a questionnaire, and the questionnaire is really basic information. What are you looking for? What kind of personality would match your lifestyle? What are you looking for in an animal personality wise, and basic information. And kind of our pre-screening is really just checking our records to make sure there's no animal cruelty or neglect on file. And then we want to get you in the doors. So all of those questions, if we have certain requirements on dogs, we go over that during the counseling session. We'll introduce you to the dogs, and then we'll talk about the needs of the animal or cat or any animal in our facility. Talk about the needs of the animal and discuss whether or not it's a good match, but we do that all in person rather than up front. We get you in the door, we have a conversation with you, and then together really decide whether or not it's a good match or not.
Okay, we are actually a foster only rescue. So for something like that, because I really love that idea, and I really love the idea of connecting more with the people that are getting the dogs, because I think it'll give them a better home for sure. How would you suggest, do you think that a phone interview, again, we don't have a physical facility. Do you think that first session would be good as a phone interview, kind of just like a phone?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because we're doing counseling in person. If you're foster-based, yes, I would say instead of doing it in person, do it over the phone. And I know a lot of organizations are going more towards the virtual meet and greets and the virtual counseling. And so that's definitely an option. And it's just more personal instead of asking everything up front, scheduling a phone call, let's talk about it and see who we can find that'll match what you're looking for.
If I could, just for a moment, I would love to get to hear all of the panelists, just some of the practices that they implemented, and then we'll take questions afterwards. But love where you're coming from on this. And I think we might have lost Charice. But yeah,
Charice,
maybe it's Shelbi.
Yeah. Thank
Hi.
you. Thanks, Allison.
Hey, yeah, I'm Shelbi Waters with the Souris Valley Animal Shelter. Our application was very interesting. I know we originally had put that we wanted to focus on equity and emergency housing, which is our program where we house survivors of domestic violence. We'll house their pets for free, typically for an unlimited period of time. We'll vet them, care for them, and then place them back in the home when the survivor is back on their feet. Really very few opportunities came up for us to actually implement that. But an opportunity did come up for us to begin conversations and work with the three affiliated tribes. So on the reporting end, I think that's what we ended up highlighting the absolute most was our new and engaged relationship with the various reservations in North Dakota and how that really just became a friendship with the animal control officers, which then led to free vaccine clinics and free microchip clinics. So we applied on one side and then our reporting ended up being on something completely different. But I will echo Faith with saying that we did update our adoption application process to be more inclusive and 100% more conversation based, which I'll just add for right now. My team likes a lot more because it's less paperwork and more relationship building. So that has been something that we would like to highlight and something that has really benefited us as well. So
I'm still here. This is Charice. I just had to switch devices. I had a computer crash. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so sorry about that. So we started using a conversational approach versus just blanket policies and procedures. And our whole mission was to welcome in adopters, welcome in the whole community to work with us and each other, and in creating a safety net for pets in our county, since resources were really scarce as everywhere. But just to kind of dispel any of the outdated and antiquated kind of policies and procedures that were being used, we changed our adoption procedures. We did so by looking at how are we discriminating, and, you know, economic status, age of adopters, and, you know, trying to say, oh, well, if you're a senior, all you get is a senior pet, if that's not what was suited to them. But we just had a conversation about any barriers too, like fenced yards. We don't do big background checks. We don't call anybody's landlords or their HOAs, any of that. And so we started also to just pool our resources, see who had what, who was willing to work with us and each other. And we ended up really making some good strides here in Anderson County.
So at the SPCA of Hancock County in Trenton, Maine, we have done something similar. So we've also moved our applications for adoption, for fostering, and also for volunteering to a more conversational nature. So we, still have applications, but it's really, I think, like all the other panelists have said already, is moving those that information to just like kind of basic things that we need to know to hopefully get that person in the door or to have a conversation. And we've seen our adoptions increase. We've gotten feedback. There was one adopter who said she was just so grateful because we were the only shelter in the area that, returned her call and adopted to her. And she, has provided a wonderful home to the pet that she adopted from us. So I think, coming out of the pandemic too, and knowing we are the only shelter in our county, there's a lot of, and we're also very rural. So I think that there are some barriers to people who aren't able to, maybe entertain adopting a pet that's quite a bit further away. So the fact that, we've been able to, I think, cut down on the paperwork and focus that energy on returning calls. And again, having those conversations, getting to know people on the volunteer side of things. We have actually more volunteers now than we can train. And so that's kind of a good problem for us to be having. The other thing that I can say too, as someone from the development side of things at our organization, is I've actually had a couple of wonderful digital volunteers. So I've worked with our volunteer coordinator who's gotten a lot of interest from people who, maybe because we serve such a large area, maybe for them, it's quite a long commute to come in physically to the shelter, or they have, they're not physically able to come and clean cages, that kind of thing. But we're just having a lot more conversations with people who are interested in, they have the inclination to volunteer, but maybe they can't see themselves fitting into one of our kind of previous volunteer categories. And so now we try to just have those conversations, and we've been able to bring a lot more people into the fold, and they've been able to provide some really wonderful support for us in ways that we hadn't been able to utilize volunteers in the past. And so I think a lot of that does go back to just making it more inclusive and more welcoming from that first moment that they have the idea that they want to be involved in some way, and then fill out an application.
Thank you. We've had some already feedback from the audience of saying, oh my gosh, they always hear that shelters aren't returning calls. But thank you for making these conversations happen so that they are more inclusive. And we'd love to get through or have some questions that I think you all know are we were going to ask. How did you get buy-in from your team internally and or communities, so externally. If you worked with a specific community, we would also love to hear how about your experience. Shelbi, did you
You want me to hop in, Irene?
Yeah, thank
I can
you.
jump in and start answering, sure. Yeah, so I think there's multiple answers that I can go with on this front. So externally, I'll hit on the 3 affiliated tribes. The mentality for my team, and I think for our community, was that, hey, on the reservation, they trap animals, they sit in traps, they starve to death, they freeze to death. And so therefore, we shouldn't help, or if we do help, we should be very explicit and have these call to actions that almost shame that community. And I won't lie, that is something that we did at one point. Of course, there was a huge reaction to it and people sympathized, but it didn't help our relationship with the 3 affiliated tribes whatsoever. It was kind of offensive for them because they have limited resources and they're doing what they can. And in their opinions, things were actually not that bad. They needed us to see for ourselves. So externally, we reached out and then went there and started developing a relationship. But also externally, we changed our language to not highlight that they were using traps and that they were doing X, Y, and Z, but to instead highlight the partnership and all the positive things that they were doing, like driving 5 hours in a snowstorm just to bring one 11-year-old dog to us that may or may not live. I mean, that's a big deal for a reservation to utilize their resources and have an animal control officer do that. Internally, it was a pretty easy shift. At the time, we had hired an Indigenous man who was our veterinarian, and he was able to really enable those positive conversations. And even created a whole cultural workbook on this is how Indigenous communities feel about animals. And so this is the way they treat animals, and this is the way they interact with animals. And while you might not understand it, here's the way you can learn and try to understand it to be more inclusive. So that was extremely helpful. And if anyone wants that book, I'm happy to share it. He put a lot of work into it, and it was actually really phenomenal. But yeah, overall, Irene, I think my team did a good job. And like I said, it all started with that piece of change the language you're using, don't shame people, which should be pretty simple and black and white. But as advocates for animals, sometimes our bleeding hearts, to naturally shame people, but it was certainly not the right way to go. And once we stopped doing that, we were able to build more and more on top of that relationship.
Thanks to your team for doing so many changes at the language level, making people welcome and included, is navigated and asking the group. Or were there not? Charice, were you trying to unmute?
No, I was not, but I am still here.
Okay.
I mean, if you want, I can go ahead and answer while I'm still with my Wi-Fi. So along the lines that she just was talking about, like that's the big thing. I engaged a lot with the low-income communities. And I actually live in just a working class neighborhood in rural Tennessee. And just from my previous work at other organizations, I saw a lot of the shaming that was going on, whether it was because of finances or because they didn't have a fenced yard or they didn't have enough, understanding of why you shouldn't let a dog live outside on a chain. The respect is the essential part. And, you can't change somebody's mind by beating them over the head with a hammer. You have to come from a place of understanding, because most people, regardless of how much money they have or the resources they have available, they love their pets just as much as better off people do. So we really started there. When they don't feel like they're judged, And nobody wants to feel judged. And so that's where I started at. And we have had numerous people. I've had even a family in Kentucky that they couldn't care for their pets. One was a husky living in a crate out in a backyard with no shelter, food, or water in his own feces. And they had the guts to say, hey, we call Charice, she's going to help us. And since then, they've brought me 4 other animals and we found them homes. But it's just a matter of really what I've seen is seeing where everybody is, what they're working with, and trying to help them and make them feel comfortable enough to come to you when they need something. Because, and I don't know if I told you this at the beginning, but our mission is not, we don't have a rescue. We don't have a facility and we don't have foster homes. What we do, what we found has been most successful is to prevent shelter intake by supporting owners and helping to rehome if there is not another avenue to prevent them from surrendering their animals. So that's sort of where we're coming from, if that makes any sense.
And Irene, I did want to add just for the audience that while we were working with the 3 affiliated tribes, SPAS has always been very strict on relationships and partnerships have to be professional and streamlined and just black and white. You want a dog to come to our shelter, you fill out this paperwork by this date or it's a no-go. But with the 3 affiliated tribes, we realized they're not going to do it. So if we want to help them, we have to remove that barrier even for our partners and to make it easier. Sometimes that paperwork can be daunting. Electronic systems are daunting if you're not used to using them. So now, and it's been going on a year strong at this point, it's a simple text message with a picture from them saying, we held this dog for the correct period of time, we're on our way to you. And if you would have asked me a year ago if any partner could do that, it would have been a hard no. But I also wanted to add that the 3 affiliated tribes are going from essentially a facility that's kind of like a garage. It didn't have heat when we were there for an event that they hosted, to now touring our building at the end of the month so they can replicate our new facility to have a more modern shelter for animals. And that's really cool. And I don't think that they would have felt inspired to do that without that positive relationship. So it just takes a tiny bit to help inspire others to do better. So I just want everyone to remember that and stay encouraged by it.
Great. Thank you for those specific examples of how you removed barriers and built relationships. Faith or Rhiannon, did you have any input for the first question? If not, we'll be happy to go on to the second.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a quick anecdote. As we were talking about moving a lot of the questions off of the questionnaire or application process into counseling, we saw the way questions were asked came with bias, came with judgment, and didn't have the respect that we're all talking about, and had that element of shame. So one of the examples of that is asking if you rent or own and the type of home. We all know that there are financial differences in the United States, and certain classes of people aren't able to own a home, and we don't want to shame people. Anybody in any kind of home, we can find an animal that works for you. Additionally, moving into conversations, a way we created buy-in was really through not only the facts and the data. Open adoptions, adopters welcome model is very well researched. A lot of people do it. And so when I wrote my proposal to be approved by Montgomery County, I had a lot of research. I had a lot of data. But to get the buy-in from staff, that was actually the most difficult part. And what helped there was not only to meet with all the different departments and talk through everything, but actually seeing the change. So an example there is, we used to ask up front, do you plan to declaw a cat? If they answered yes, immediate no. What we found by moving that into a conversation, we found that people actually didn't know what that meant. And a lot of people actually thought we were talking about just clipping the nails. And so by moving from a black and white question into a conversational approach, we're able to sit down with people, are you planning to declaw your cat? Do you know what that means? And then explaining it further and the repercussions of doing that. And then usually we would get a, oh no, I had no idea, I'm not going to do it. So that was one way we were able to remove barriers, and sharing those examples with staff have really helped them come around and get on board with the changes.
So Faith, I have a question for you, or for any of the other panelists, if you don't mind, Irene. I'm just kind of jumping in. Did anyone have backlash from their community about removing barriers? Because I mean, it was a butt whooping for us. So I'm just curious what others experience with regard to the animal advocates specifically in your communities.
I was lucky I didn't have too much backlash from the community. It was more from internal staff because people were afraid. What I hear a lot of is we can't say no, and that's not true. So we can say no, we can place restrictions if it means, if it's in the best interest of the animal, but we're not doing that arbitrarily. So I had to do a lot of talking through issues with staff, but I'm sorry, not with the community so much. Maybe someone else can jump in.
I had more trouble, not with the public, but it was rescue organizations here in our community. Some of them, they don't want to work with me because I'm not gonna call landlords, and I'm not gonna deny somebody a dog because they don't have a fenced yard. And they feel like it is irresponsible. These, however, the groups that I had those issues with, for the most part, there's one or two board members that do agree with me. So it is just kind of a really tentative relationship with the group as a whole. Some support, some don't. And, you know, we have one or two groups that are really, really influential here in the town that I live in, the county that we serve. And it was rocky for a while. However, they will still, it's what I tell them, it's not about the situation, it's about the pet. We should be happy when adopters show up. We should be happy when volunteers show up. Welcome everybody. That's how you stop having animals die in shelters every night, because they're dying while we're sitting here looking down from our crystal palace, right? And so that's not okay. And I don't tell them that in that way, in a roundabout way. It's about the pet, not the situation. And I will explain, here's why they can't afford this, or how come this or that. And I think once you can start a conversation with the rescues and with the public, you know, it's always, no matter what situation, to me, it's been about having a conversation. And they might not agree with you today, but they might later on in the future.
Charice, I love that you brought up, and there's some questions that are coming up in the chat about it. Can you talk more about why you don't check where folks live, or with landlords and things like that?
So it's discriminatory. And I mean, honestly, I'm going to tell you, I am one of the most fierce animal advocates out there that you're going to meet. I don't own my own home, but I have multiple pets, and they have a wonderful home. They have everything they need and then some. They're living in Disneyland. The way that you should look at these things is, one, you have to trust people to be good. You know, you have to, if they have an issue with their animals that they adopt from you, make it where they can come back and say, hey, I'm having problems. And that's how I can do that, is because I start a relationship, I start a conversation. They know if anything ever happens and they can't keep their pet, or they need a bag of dog food to get through the week, hey, call Charice, she's going to help us. And if she can't help us, she's going to put us in touch with someone who will, and she'll advocate for us. And so that's what I try to do. We've had really, really good luck. I've had, we've pulled 2 dogs straight off of chains in horrible situations. One I handed over to a young man and his wife, and they loaded him up and took him back to Kentucky. I still get updates from them over a year later saying, hey, Samson's doing great. Look at him now. And that's not just with that dog. It's with cats. It's with multiples. And so the relationship is the key. That's how you don't have to do all those things.
And you said trust, and I think that really hits the nail on the head. We need to trust people to know where they live and the policies of where they live and to make informed decisions. We have to navigate, there's a nearby county who have a pit bull ban. And when we are asking for basic information in the questionnaire, they are giving us their address in the county that they live in. So we will bring that up and talk about these things during the counseling session, but we're not going to ask them if they rent or own or the type of home they live in. We're going to ask them what kind of animal suits their needs and what they're looking for, and navigate that in a little bit more respectful conversation than upfront black and white.
We do the same thing, and it's so great. What we do is we call it a matchmaking service. And I'm sure there's plenty of folks out there that do it that way. And that's much more approachable for any adopter, potential adopter, is, hey, they're going to make me a match. It's not going to be, they're going to give me the 3rd degree in the Spanish interrogation, right? And they're not going to turn me down for an adoption because of this little, I've been turned down for an adoption before because I could not find my oldest dog's first vaccination record. He was 6 years old and I was turned down and told I was unfit. So I know what it feels like, but then let alone if I was in a different type of a situation where I had been discriminated against in the past and so on and so forth, I would not want to go to some shelters in my area and even put in an application for a foster home just because of the way that you're treated. So we just try to do the opposite, kind of like what you're saying.
And I see a lot of people are asking about return policies. That was another thing that we had to address and get buy-in for, is really going the route of returns aren't bad. It's okay. Dogs particularly, they got out. Studies have shown that their cortisol level, their stress hormones will decrease even a short afternoon out of the shelter. We get more information on the animal, we can make a better match. So that was also a huge shift. We aren't putting a black mark on people's records when they return an animal or surrender an animal, but we're going to get information from them. Obviously, if it was a case of abusive neglect, we would probably not adopt it. We wouldn't adopt them. But if it was a case of this just wasn't a good match, the animal didn't meet my expectations, we can no longer have this animal for homing reasons, we would still find a better match for them in the future.
Yeah, and we really embrace foster to adopt, especially for some of our more active animals or ones that struggle with anxiety or other temperaments that are sometimes hard to predict once they're out of the shelter. And those can last anywhere between 7 days and 90 days. We like to really give people that time and space they need. And we did have a lot of pushback from other shelters stating that that was just such an inappropriate way to handle it. But what I go back to, and Ivy had asked the question, how did I handle the pushback from the community with regard to removing barriers? I specifically tell news outlets and all of the partners who criticize us that my number one goal is that animals are not in our shelter. For me, length of stay is a very, very big deal. And I've just watched so many dogs and cats deteriorate over time because we weren't accepting applications for them, or we just wanted to wait a little longer before we placed them into a home for whatever reasons we decided to make up. And I just had enough. To me, I would rather take the gamble that they go into a foster to adopt situation and we remove some of these barriers so they can be with a loving human versus stuck in a kennel all day where, again, mentally they're deteriorating. So I wouldn't say, Ivy, that was always the best approach. I've definitely come off as kind of cold, and I hear time and time again from the newspaper that every time I respond, it's too academic. So therefore their readership doesn't understand when I say length of stay and when I use all of these animal welfare terms that we understand, but they don't understand. And that really brought us down to a level of, okay, but if readership can't understand what we're saying. We understand it from an academic standpoint, but if the average person doesn't understand it, that means folks running rescues maybe out of their home who are doing great work, this is why they also cannot understand it. We're not explaining it in a way that can be understood across the board. And that is also how we felt about our adoption application for the Open Arms Challenge. So all of those things and the words that we use, we've really shaped and evolved over time to help address these issues. Again, length of stay or removing barriers, enrichment, they all sound wonderful to us, but if a volunteer comes in, they're like, what's enrichment? Oh, you want me to go play with the dog in the dog park? Got it. So I think words matter, and how you use those words is really important. So I hope that answered your question, Ivy.
This is so wonderful, such rich conversation. And I think we're winding down on time, but I'd love to hear from each of you. It's been a full year since you've implemented this, and what have you learned, and how has your community responded, internal and external?
I don't mind jumping in because I have to leave a little bit early, but I will say every single leadership position in our shelter for the past year is led by a member of the BIPOC community. So whether I'm Korean and German, our veterinarian at the time was an Indigenous man. Laura's family is from Mexico. She's first generation. And then Siri, who is our development director, she is from Thailand and she is first generation. So really, really excited to show a diverse population in our shelter. Although that might not matter with regard to day to day, I think culturally it has mattered a lot internally, because now we're all able to embrace change in different capacities from different experiences. But externally, it's more welcoming because, I mean, we're in Minot, North Dakota, right? A bunch of white folks is what everyone always says, but you walk in and you see another Korean American or Thai American or an Indigenous man, it makes you feel better. You see people who look like you and culturally understand things that you understand as well. So we are huge advocates right now for hiring members in the BIPOC community. We actively seek and search and offer relocation packages for that reason, to diversify our shelter and to continue doing it so we can continue on the path that we're on.
Thank you, Shelbi. We know you have to jump off soon, so really appreciate you joining us today.
Ben, that's cool. You learned how to make kimchi. I will say, even as a Korean, I cannot make kimchi. So I might have to chat with you, help me impress my grandma.
Does anyone else want to jump in? What have you learned in the past year since you implemented, and how has your community responded?
Well, I can speak to what the process was like for our staff, which being a very small team, we didn't have, really any pushback or difficult conversations with our staff to implement these changes, which was great. We live in a community that is very rural, but also we are a major tourist destination. And so housing has become incredibly difficult for folks, to even find rentals in our region, especially year-round rentals, because there's so much more, incentive for people to rent seasonally. And so, we've gotten only really positive feedback to speak of from the community as far as making some of these changes, just understanding how much the housing crisis in our region is affecting everyone, and all local business owners, and everyone who knows us and supports us is acutely aware of this issue, and I think is seeing these intersections more through some of the conversations that we've been having. So that's been positive. And I think someone else had a question about digital volunteers in the chat, so I can kind of speak to that too. I haven't actually been on the staff for the whole last year, but since I have joined, I really just see how amazing the opportunities are for volunteers. And that's something that we've changed to, and that, we might have people who were interested in enrichment but didn't know what that word meant specifically. So we now call them like our cat cuddlers. So we do have people who come in on a regular basis, and it's, whenever they know when we're open, they come when they can. It's not like, oh, if you can't make it every Tuesday at this time, we don't want you here at all, right? So it really is trying to word the needs that we have for our volunteers in a way that people understand and describes exactly what we're looking for, so that that emphasis on language and kind of making things understandable that folks are talking about is definitely something that we've seen, and we've seen a benefit from as well.
Amazing. Faith and Charice, any last words that you want to share with the community?
Well, I just wanted to say that it has been a exciting year. And we have it at first, it was really scary. It felt like we were taking a lot of risks and rolling the dice. We do, however, we would tell everyone, if there's ever a time that you cannot keep this animal that you've adopted from us, please call us first and let us help you find a new home. I've had one that had called and brought the little dog back, and we found her a new home, but they never, they're not going other places and dumping the animals. I don't believe. I've learned that, you trust people who are going to trouble to adopt a pet. They're not just out to do something terrible, and believe in the goodness of your community and of adopters. So it's been hard. It's taken a lot of patience, and change is not going to come right away, and it's not going to come just because you want it. So it's something that you have to keep working at, and it evolves.
I think that was beautifully said. Change is hard, but we're all in it for the right reasons. And I just thank you all for participating in this talk today. And I just want to encourage you all to embrace the change in creating a more welcoming, inclusive, less biased policies, procedures. It's not going to be an easy feat, but I know you all can do it, and you're all very well prepared. So I just used all the evidence that you can find in our community to make my point, to make my changes, and then also including those anecdotes when the changes were put in place, and it all went fairly well.
Thanks everyone so much. Thank you, Irene, for co-hosting. This will be all available on the Maddie's Pet Forum, and let's continue the conversation. Have a great week, everyone.